After 18 years of marriage, Prime Minister Trudeau and his wife Sophie recently announced they were separated. And joining us to discuss this Canadian version of conscious uncoupling is relationship expert Jessica O'Reilly. Hey, Jess, how are ya?
Good morning. I'm great. How's it going?
Good, good. All right, so let's get to their announcement. In making the announcement, the couple said they made the decision after many meaningful and difficult conversations. What did you take from that statement?
You know what I take from that is that so many uncouplings or separations now need not be acrimonious. I think that if we go back 10, 20, 30 years, there was always this idea that there's some sort of explosive event. There's, deep, deep anger, throwing dishes, hurt. But I do think that what we're realizing now is that through conversation, through understanding, through growing into yourself and sometimes growing apart, sometimes relationships evolve. And so it's not necessarily that the relationship ends, it's just that it's no longer an intimate or romantic partnership, and maybe it evolves into a friendship. That's what I'm hoping, and I can't speak to their specific case, but I'm seeing more of that as a trend more generally.
Okay. Now, they also spoke about raising their kids in a safe and loving environment and talked about plans about co-parenting their children. As a matter of fact, there are reports that the family are on vacation together this week.
Also, far more common than you might realize. So first of all, we have data showing that co-parenting is good for the kids, right? So lower levels of anxiety, higher levels of happiness, lower levels of depression, all that good stuff. And we are seeing this across the board. I think I was here a couple weeks ago and we spoke about the fact that people are sometimes living as neighbors so that they can co-parent their kids. I know people who obviously can't necessarily afford separate units, so they're living separately in the same house. And for some people, this does work. And it goes back to that evolution of relationship. It's not that we have no relationship anymore, it's that we're just no longer romantic partners. So we might be parenting partners, we might be more like roommates, but we can still deeply care for one another. So 21% of people, according to some data, remain friends with an ex-partner. And I don't know if you have any friends like that or family members like that who, like I can speak for my parents. They definitely are still friends, and they take care of each other.
And I can say that for my parents as well. They've been split a very long time, but my stepmom invites my mom over to their house even for Christmas Eve. That's actually become a thing that we come together for Christmas Eve. So we've really blended our families. Let's talk about why that is so important for the kids, what message that gives to them.
I think it sends the message that even if your relationship shifts, you don't have to hate each other. You don't have to be hard on one another. And we know that when parents are supportive of one another, when they're not bashing one another, when they're not trying to create factions and pull kids to one side, we know that there are more positive outcomes for the kids. And we don't really need data to tell us that. We know better. Now, in the heat of the moment, when you're angry at someone, when you're hurt, when you maybe perhaps weren't ready for this split, it's easy to want to get as many people as possible on side. And if you are doing this, if you can avoid it, please do. But if you are doing this, you want to leave your kids out of it. You want to speak positively or at least neutrally about your ex. And remember that you're a team and you share a lot in common, especially if you have kids. You share the same goal. I think once you're a parent, your life really becomes about raising these beautiful humans, launching them into the world. And that's something that you're going to do together, whether you're living together as partners or you're simply co-parenting.
And it is so important. So you really want to get this right? If you are separating, divorcing. But how do you get there to what you were speaking of earlier? I mean, can it be a longer process for some couples than others, maybe, Jess?
Sure, absolutely. I think any of us who are, the children of divorced parents or who have watched friends divorce, we certainly know that how you feel on day 3 after the separation is not the same as how you feel in 3 months, in 3 years, in 30 years. So you do need to give yourself time and grace. I think that something we don't talk about enough is the grief that we need to address after the change or the dissolution of a relationship. We tend to reserve grief for things like death, right? But anytime you lose something, whether it's ritual, whether it's partnership, whether it's your living arrangement, we actually are grieving. So that process that might involve, anger and bargaining and depression and then eventually acceptance, that's something we need to give ourselves grace and permission to go through and talk about. Right? I think with the shame and stigma of divorce, we often sweep it under the rug and we see things like divorce parties or divorce moons. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do those things, but I hope that we're not glossing over with the positive in a way that we're not working through the pain, the hurt, the hopelessness, all the feelings that you're allowed to feel as a human being.
Now, Trudeau is the first PM to go through a separation in office since his parents. How much of a guide do you think that was for him?
So I think it really depends on whether or not his parents actually talked about it, right? So we're talking about decades ago where we perhaps were less open about these things, but I hope that over time, and I'm not going to specifically focus on him, but for anybody who's been through this, if our parents were open about, you know what, here's what I struggled with, here's how I dealt with, that positive outcome of sharing experiences, not sharing advice, just sharing my experience, we can all learn from that. And that's a form of group therapy without the therapist in the room.
All right. Well, great stuff, Jess. And you're back with us tomorrow as well, right?
I am. Two early mornings together. Looking forward.
All right. Look forward to that, Jess. And thanks for this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.